This video was made in association with KnifeInformer.com. Head on over to Knife Informer for all of your blade-related needs, including reviews, comparisons, stats, and more.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to a video that's a little bit different. I've gotten my hands on these three Shirogorovs, and they're all so similar that I didn't really feel like it was the right thing to make a separate video for each one, because obviously the ergonomics are going to be the same on all of them, the actions are going to be similar on all of them, the aesthetics are going to be similar on all of them, so instead, what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at a bit of a comparison video for Shirogorovs that have 4-inch blades and that are of this design. Now, there's a couple things that are missing from here. So the only real thing that's missing from the lineup is an F3, which is Shirogorov's liner lock. I've handled two examples of the F3, and I even made a video about one, but I never published it because it wasn't up to my standards. So if I say, all 4-inch Shiros during the video or make any reference like that, please understand that I'm excluding the F3 from this particular process. It is a fairly different knife, being a liner lock and everything, but it is the same overall size and shape of these knives, but I don't have one here, so that's obviously missing. And then there's obviously some other variants missing as well, notably different mill patterns and blade steel variants. So you have the Shirogorov 95T, which stands for turtle. That's the turtle milling pattern. And then there's going to be some other blade steel types and everything that aren't represented here, but mostly we have a pretty good representation of what Shirogorov offers in this department. So let's go ahead and jump in and just kind of explain what each of these are and what we're looking at. So the first knife here is mine. This is a knife that I own. This is just a Shirogorov 95, F95. This is going to be sort of the entry-level 95, and it's pretty base in terms of what's going on here. So I do have the S milling pattern, which is pretty cool, and this is slightly more rare than the standard, or it's a little bit more rare than like finding the 95T or finding them in this kind of design as well. Using the word rare probably isn't the right thing to do, because there's probably plenty of these out there, but I don't see too many of them, and the reason that I bought this one was because it had the different milling pattern, and that's something that I definitely liked. However, everything else about this knife is low end in terms of what Shiro offers in this size and shape. So we do have a single row bearing system. There is no internal milling, so the knife is fairly heavy, just 2 slabs of titanium. And then it is S30V steel. So this thing is kind of like the entry-level base version of the models that we're taking a look at today. If we move on to the next knife, this is the Shirogorov 95R, often referred to as 3 bears, which I believe is in reference to the 3 letter M's that are involved with this knife. So what separates this knife from this one are the 3 M's. The first of which being the multi-row bearing system. M, of course, being multi. So you have the multi-row bearing system on this knife. Then you have M390 steel, which we can see here. So this is going to be a very high-quality super steel. And then we have internal milling. Of course, I put the emphasis on the M as the third M. And I can show you that. Not doing the best job of it, but there is internal milling. There's tons of great pictures online of the internal milling of Shiros. I haven't pulled any of these apart for the video, but something that a lot of people really appreciate about the internal milling on these Shirogorovs is that they're very artistically done. It's not just kind of like trapezoidal cutouts like it is on basically every knife. They do this really awesome like wavy pattern, and there's just a lot of detail to the internal milling. I have a friend who likes to say, beautiful on the inside as they are on the outside. So definitely go jump on Google and just check out internal milling on Shirogorovs, and you'll be able to see that they really take an artistic approach to doing the internal milling, and that's something to be appreciated. And then finally, what we have here is a Haiti R. So this is the Mac Daddy full-blown version of the Haiti. So the Haiti, the only difference between a Haiti and a 95 with the Shirogorovs is that the Haiti has a non-titanium show side. So typically they're G10 for like the lower end models, and those will either run on single row bearing systems or washers. So there's plenty of Hades out there that run on washers. They'll have a cheaper steel like S30V or something like that. And then the difference here is that this one has a backspacer, whereas these are on standoffs. I'm not sure if base Hades have a standoff or if they all have the backspacer. So I'm sorry for not knowing that. But the main difference between this knife and this knife is that it has a non-titanium show side or show frame, show scale, however you want to say it. But otherwise, these knives are basically identical. They are identical in terms of shape and size, and then you have all these slight variants in terms of the bearing system and everything like that, and then of course the milling patterns and such. So the base version of the Haiti is going to share features in common with the base 95, whereas you wouldn't have internal milling, you'd have a cheaper steel, you might have washers or a single row bearing system, and then you probably won't have something as beautiful as a carbon fiber twill on the show side. You'll probably have like a G10 or something like that. It is worth noting that being the Haiti R and this being the 95R, these are the, again, Mac Daddy versions of each of their models. This is M390 steel again, multi-row bearing system, and it is also milled on the inside on the titanium scale. So great job here. This is going to be the lightest of the three. And that kind of takes us to the next point, which is that I really want to look at the weight differences between these knives. This was a big inspiration for making this video in the first place, was just kind of being able to do a bit of a weight comparison, really give everybody an idea of what they're buying. So what I want to start out with is the obvious heaviest of the three knives. This has no internal milling. It's two giant titanium slabs. Let's just go ahead and see how that lines up. Bam! Check that out. You can see 5.33 ounces. That's really heavy. Even for a knife that's longer like this knife, this is a 9-inch length knife. 5.3 is up there. Usually 3.5 ounces to 4.5 ounces is the sweet spot for knives that are kind of 8 inches or a little bit more in terms of how much people like to carry them. But you can see this knife's definitely on the heavier side. It's not quite balanced because of that. And it's definitely a chunky one. So then if we upgrade and we take the same exact knife, but we do some internal milling to it, still same thickness, same titanium slabs, same blade stock, everything like that is the same, just internal milling. We'll see how much that takes off the top. 4.5 ounces. The reactions that you guys are getting out of me right now are legitimate because I haven't actually done this comparison yet. So I honestly wasn't expecting that much of a drop. That's a pretty significant drop. That's almost a full ounce difference in weight. So 4.5 ounces, 4.55 definitely brings this down to the more reasonable weight for everyday carry. Again, I mentioned the range of about 3.5 to 4.5 on 8-inch knives or so. This is again a 9-inch knife in a 4.5 ounce package, which is pretty good. You can definitely feel the difference as well. This is clearly a heavier knife, and this is easily more comfortable to hold in your hand, easily more balanced, and it's just it's really excellent. So we're taking a milled titanium show scale, and now we're swapping it for a non-milled carbon fiber twill scale, but we are adding in the weight of a titanium backspacer, okay? So keep those things in mind. We do have slightly thicker scales on the Haiti. You can just barely see that, but they are ever so slightly thicker, so this is gonna be a lighter knife because you're exchanging such a heavy material for a light material. But do remember that the milling is not here on the show side anymore. We are adding in a backspacer and stuff like that. So let's see how the Haiti R lines up. 4.23. Yeah, that seems about right. Now, honestly, when I hold the two knives, this one feels plainly like the lighter one, which is kind of interesting because it's really not that much of a weight difference. So I suppose you trade off the lack of milling and the addition of the backspacer for a much lighter show side. And ultimately, these are going to be the same feeling in your pocket if you're trying to decide between which one to carry. If you're really worried about weight and you were thinking about getting an entirely different model, such as the Haiti over the weight, then yeah, I mean, you're saving 0.3 ounces, but frankly, you're not really going to be able to tell the difference, especially if you don't have one of these 95Rs to directly compare to. So if you really like the look of this, or you really like a full titanium frame lock, but you think you want something that's lighter, you don't have to swing for the Haiti. You can still get this knife, and you'll be just about equally as happy because the weight difference isn't too much. So let's get this out of the way. And I just want to talk about a couple more of the differences before I just go over these knives in general. So I kind of mentioned some of this stuff before, but you do have the backspacer versus standoffs on the Haiti versus the 95s. And there are some other little differences in the 3D milling on the clips, for example. The milling that you get throughout the knife obviously is going to be slightly different. And most of that really just boils down to aesthetic preferences. These knives ultimately are very, very similar. Now, one thing that I will say about the twill is that there's pretty aggressive milling throughout the twill pattern here, which does give you a little bit more grip than the super slippery plain tie slabs. So that might be something to consider as well. If we go ahead and jump into talking about the ergonomics of this shape overall, we're only going to need one of these knives because they all have the exact same shape and size. So let's take a look at the ergonomics. Again, being a 9-inch overall length knife, this thing is an absolute monster. Well, let's go ahead and size comparison this thing next to a Neon, because that's obviously the smaller Shirogorov to choose from, and something that a lot of people are going to be on the fence about which one to go for. You can see that the Neon is completely dwarfed by the Haiti, and I mean, it's really no contest. It's a question of, do you want a really small knife or do you want a really big knife? Shirogorov, unfortunately, doesn't really offer an in-between. I'd like to see something that was kind of a middle ground. Maybe like a Neon large would be cool, so you still just kind of get the Neon package, but maybe with this much more blade length and this much more thickness. You can see that it's just a really big leap. I've always felt that the Neon was too small for me. I don't like how thin the handle is and everything like that. Again, personal preference and all of that. But, these knives are pretty big. They're pocket swords. So it's definitely a leap to jump into the full 9-inch size knife. They could definitely stand to offer something in the middle as far as I'm concerned. But let's go ahead and talk about the ergonomics. The ergonomics on the knife are fantastic. There's really no way around it. You can see here I have this nice kind of mellow sweeping section for my index finger, and then I get a nice rounded off area for the rest of my fingers. I'm not really trapped. I'm not really forced to any position in the knife, which I like. If you take a look at something like a where is it? Okay, well, I can't find an example right now. I was looking at a knife earlier, and I had thought about this, but a lot of times knives will have like a little bump here or something that's kind of sharp, and it kind of forces you to find places for your fingers, whereas this knife, you can really grab it however you want, with whatever size hand you want, and you're pretty much going to flow around the knife pretty well. On the rear of the spine, you have pretty decent contouring. It folds pretty well into the hand. You do get a nice long, flat pattern of jimping where the thumb rests. And overall, the saber grip ergonomics are pretty stellar. They're pretty spot on. Pinch grip is going to be the same deal. Your thumb gets in here pretty well, and you're able to pinch around here, which does really great to support pressure coming from your index finger. Again, your index finger can kind of take advantage of this jimping. Obviously, the blade shape is a perfect slicer. It's just full flat grind with a normal drop point shape. I'm literally not going to get any more involved with the blade than that, because if it's not obvious to you that this is an excellent blade for EDC use, then I don't know how to make it any more obvious. But so ergonomics are great and everything like that. And in terms of the action being different on each of these, I'm going to say something that, might be a little controversial or whatever, however you want to phrase it. But if you're looking at this going, okay, Tyler, I want you to tell me, is the multi-row bearing system better than the single row bearing system? Is the Haiti R action better than the 95R action? Look, the answer is you can't tell, and the reason is because the variance on each knife has more of an impact than the variance between SRBS and MRBS or the Haiti versus the 95 or anything like that. So it really boils down to, like, this knife, for example, has an excellent action. It's pretty snappy. It's got a bit of a lighter detent compared to these two knives, but it's still snappy. You can see that it drops shut absolutely fantastically, right? It almost comes to a complete close every time just based on gravity. Super smooth, right? However, this knife has kind of a grindy lock stick issue where it's not super sticky, but you can see here I'm able to pretty easily move the lock bar around, and you can feel it grinding up against the tang here. And so this has the least pleasurable disengagement of the lock bar of all three, even though it has a really good drops shut action. But none of what I just said about this is true of every single Haiti. The consistency is just not there. And an issue that I find with pretty much all the Shiragoras that I've dealt with is they all have kind of weird lock stick issues. This particular Neon is one of the only Shiros that I've ever managed to get my hands on that has absolutely no lock stick ever. They did a good job on this one, I guess. It's obviously been disassembled a few times and all of that, but the difference really just matters between each knife. The fact that I've gotten to handle all of these, I've handled 3 Neons, which again, not too many. I've handled 2 F3s. So I'm at about 10 or so Shiragorovs at this point, and none of them hasn't mattered what kind of bearing system it had or anything like that. It's always that each individual knife is just so different than the other that the comparison's really not fair. So I have a stronger detent on my personal 95, which means that the deployment is a little bit snappier, but it takes a little bit more of a shake to close. It is on SRBS. But I don't feel the friction as much either, because SRBS has fewer bearing balls against the titanium frame. So I actually feel more friction when I use this knife than I do this one. But this knife has really bad lock stick. You can see it's kind of like a button. You can hear it. That's what it sounds like when it disengages. So it's really stuck in there. So this one has bad lock stick, but not every 95 has bad lock stick. And then if I take this knife, its snappiness is kind of somewhere in the middle. Its lock stick is the least problematic of the 3, but it's still there, just very mild. But I can feel the vibration of the blade closing because of the MRBS more through the frame. It's just got more friction. You have more contact between the 2 points. So I want to be very, very clear. I know that that was not the most clear description, and I've kind of been jumping around. I want to be very clear about the fact that it really depends on the knife that you get. And no, you really can't tell the difference between MRBS and SRBS. If anything, MRBS makes for a slower, more frictiony dropping feeling. It's really for the lateral stability, which is something that I learned from a friend of mine. And I was asking him because he's dealt with a lot of these knives way more than I have, and I was like, I don't get it. It just doesn't seem to matter. And he's like, well, it's more complex for complexity's sake. It does add for lateral stability. I said, okay, I understand that, but if you're really trying to convince yourself that it makes a difference in terms of the action, it doesn't. At the end of the day, I guess the purpose of making this video was to tell you guys that you should buy the one that looks the coolest to you, is the best fitting for your EDC use. So in terms of size, do I buy a Neon? Do I buy a 95? Which one's better? Blah, blah, blah. Like, buy the one that works for you. And if you're looking at the difference between a base 95 versus this, is it worth it getting the extra few $100s worth of milling and whatever? Well, if you want a lighter knife, sure. If you like the design of the mill pattern more, sure. Should I get the Haiti R? Well, do you like this cool milling pattern? Do you like the carbon fiber twill? Then sure. Do you prefer to have a backspacer versus a standoff? Then sure. But if you're talking about things like, well, is it going to have lock stick? Is it going to be a better action or whatever? Don't even think about that. Don't think about it. If you really want the better blade steel, fine. Then you want the better blade steel. But really it just boils down to personal preferences in terms of materials and aesthetics. and that's it. So please don't force yourself into buying a more expensive knife because of all these fancy things or because people told you that it's quote-unquote better. Just buy the one that you like the most, and at the end of the day, these are all some of the best knives that I've ever handled. I know that I said some negative things about them with lockstick and everything, but at the end of the day, this is one of my favorite knives in my collection, and the only reason that I'll ever sell it is if I just get another 95 that maybe has a different pattern or whatever. I might trade it for something like this just for the heck of it. I might get a Haiti because I really like the way this feels. I think it's cool. But I'm always going to have a 9-inch Shiro that's this shape in my collection. I love it. I think the ergos are great. I think the action is absolutely fantastic. And everything about them it's an excellent knife. So just go ahead and do yourself a favor. Buy the one that you like. Don't listen to everybody else that's telling you, like, oh, you got to get this over that, and this is better because I said so, and whatever. Like, it's fine. Buy the one that you want. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you'd like to see videos of all these other awesome knives, you can, of course, subscribe. I definitely appreciate it. If you'd like to see pictures of these amazing knives, you can, of course, follow me on Instagram at tovarishworks. And if you'd like to send me a lovely loaner, like these 3 knives are, then you can do so by emailing me at tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I will see you next time.